now we have this like boogeyman scapegoat that we can blame the failures on, but the fact of the matter is we were headed here anyway.
Coming to you from the Taft Podcast Studio in the heart of JXNGOP headquarters, this is Stars, Stripes, and Straight Talk with Chris and Dave.
Hey, what is going on? Thanks for stopping back by the channel. This is Stars, Stripes,
and Straight Talk.
I'm Chris.
I'm Dave.
And we got a special guest. That's right. We've got Nate Edwards with us today. Welcome to the show, Nate.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, let's before we get started today, let's have Nate. Why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself? And
all right. So as they said, my name's Nate Edwards. I'm a local guy. I'm from northwest side of Jackson, and I've been here pretty much my whole life. I lived in Detroit area for a couple of years, like during my teenage years. That's a long story. I won't get into that. But I've been around for most of my life. I'm married. I've been married for 20 years. I have 3 daughters. I do a lot of things. I work at a manufacturing facility. I'm senior leadership there. I help run in a local insurance agency, life insurance, health insurance, annuities, things like that. And then I am the vice chairman of the Jackson County GOP. So I guess I'll touch on that a little bit. I feel like that's kind of on point of the theme of the show.
Yep. And then, hey, just for our listeners outside of the state, we've had some people say, "Hey, Jackson, what? We're Jackson, Michigan."
Yep.
Right.
And just so you know, it's MI, not MS. So
that's right.
I can't tell you how many times I've had packages. They're like, "You're Jackson, Mississippi, right?" I'm like, "No, I'm not getting it when you send it there.
Yep,
It's gonna
right,
be a completely different area, right?"
Exactly.
Been to Jackson, Mississippi. It's very different.
Yes, yes, definitely different.
It's funny. Both of you grew up in Detroit. You both did some time in Detroit.
That's an interesting way to say that. I told you it's a long story. We're not getting into it.
I ain't going back.
I'm not going back. I love Detroit, by the way. I love Detroit. I'm a huge fan. Tigers lost today. It's very sad, but that's all right.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway, so yeah, Jackson guy, been around, big part of the community. Vice chairman of the local Republican Party here. So touch on that a little bit. You know, I got elected as vice chair back in December with the new cycle and everything. And I've been in the party for honestly not that long, probably I think 3-4 years. Really, the story of me getting involved it starts with like my activism, I guess, in public school issues, specifically my kids' school. I became kind of concerned with what was going on there, and I started attending the meetings. Yeah. And I'm just kind of a vocal guy, you know. I like to speak my mind, and if I see a problem, I like to bring it up, you know. I like to express my concern. So I would go to the meetings, and I would talk about the things that were concerning me, and then I had some people pull me aside. First, I had like a group that were like had some issue, and they asked me to speak on their behalf because they felt like I could articulate their point or whatever. So I did that. And, you know, I just continued to do things like that. And I had some people pull me aside and recommend that I run for school board. And,
you know, it's funny that you say that, Nate, because in today's world, I always say people want to run because they have their ambitions.
Yeah,
and they want to do their thing, right? It used to be that people would ask you to run for a representative, ask you to run for the Senate. And the response is usually no. I got to take care of my farm. I got to take care of my business. And people are like, no, I think you would represent us.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it's good to hear that story of, you know, why you ran is because you were asked to run.
Yeah, I told him no twice. So
exactly, because I got things to do and I got time for this, right?
I told him no, not because that necessarily I didn't want to do it, but I didn't feel like I had the time available that it deserved if I was elected. And, you know, if I'm going to take something on, I want to be able to give it the full attention that it deserves and requires. And I wasn't sure that I could do that. Anyway, they reached out to me, like I said, twice. I told them no twice. And third time's the charm, I guess. Basically, they reached out and they're like, look, no one else is running. The incumbents are going to walk right in.
Yeah.
We'll help you as much as we can, which I wasn't really necessarily interested in that. But anyway, long story short, I said, all right, I'll do it. I filed on the last day you could file, right?
Okay.
It was like, I don't remember what the date was. You had to file by 4 o'clock. I left my work on my lunch break and went and filed. I drove back. This is kind of a funny story. I drove back. I had just parked my truck at my work, and I got a phone call from it was a Jackson number. It was a county building. And I answered it. It was the clerk's office because they had told me to fill out the wrong paperwork.
Oh.
So I had to turn. I had to turn around and go back just then, or I wasn't going to be able to run. So
Okay.
I turned around, drove all the way back, got the paperwork done. I ran. I lost in that election, but while I was out, kind of fighting the good fight,
Yep.
out doing what I was doing, fighting what I was fighting, in the school world, apparently, and I wasn't behind, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I drew the attention of some people within the local party, and somebody reached out to me and asked me if I had ever considered being a precinct delegate or getting involved in other things, things outside of school board maybe even, and invited me to actually I think it was convention. It was like a county convention.
Oh, okay.
As
the
a
actual
guest
county
or
convention.
something?
Yeah, just like as a guest.
Right.
So I think that was like my first introduction to the party. I came to that convention, and I actually already knew some people. I've always been like politically minded, right? Like politics has always mattered to me, and I've always been conservative since as far back as I can remember. I can remember when I was in high school, 16, 17, arguing politics with people, pro-life and this and that and the other. I remember arguing with people when George Bush and Al Gore were running against each other. Anyway, I've always been conservative, right?
Right.
But
And not very popular in the Detroit area, to be honest with you.
no. Honestly, not necessarily popular in my own area, but
Well, it's because you keep going after the school boards, right?
well, so it's really interesting. The school board thing is really interesting because, like, somehow people tend to differentiate their politics from what's going on in the schools. I'm not really sure how it's kind of a mystery to me because, like, where I live is a conservative area, but
Right.
they consistently elect liberal school boards, and I think part of the problem is that you have people that claim to be conservative when they talk. School boards are nonpartisan, right? But they project themselves as people that are conservative, that have traditional family values, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I don't know. That's what they say. But then when they get into that boardroom and they have to make decisions about how to run the school and how to handle things at the school board level, they don't vote that way.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the nonpartisan school boards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the last time I checked, math wasn't Republican or Democrat.
Facts.
Science is not Republican or Democrat. Unfortunately, from my era, now I'm older than you, but I remember and now I'm, in full transparency, this was a 0 hour. So I actually went to school an hour earlier to take this class.
Okay.
Only because I had 4 gym classes my senior year. So
Nice.
they literally are like, hey, if we're going to have 4 gym classes, you got to go take something besides gym, right? So I went in and it was Mr. Early. I'm sure he's passed away. But he was a radical activist from like the 60s, right? And he had all the posters up, stop this, stop that.
Like a hippie activist?
I would say like
a hippie activist
the
from
make
back in
love
the day,
not
right?
war guy.
Right. But you know what? He taught you how to get involved.
Sure.
He taught you how to be active. He taught you applied economics. That was the name of the class. I couldn't remember it. So, and we went through things like taxes. We went through things like buying a home and, but he never told you what to think.
Yeah. No, that's
So
great.
he'd always present like, here's how to get involved. Here's how you do this. But he never said, and by the way, make sure they don't cut down the rainforest, which was a big thing back in our day, right?
Right.
So, but he never said what to get involved in. He told you how to get involved. He told you, how to be an activist,
Sure.
whether it be on the right or the left. He never, you knew where he stood.
Right.
You know what I mean? But he was an agitator. I know at one point, somebody got their car towed for parking on the road or something like that, and it wasn't properly signed. So he helped all the students write letters, and next thing you know, the city put up like 400 no parking signs in the neighborhood.
That's awesome.
All because Mr. Early did that. So it was one of those things where, when we look at schools, and the fact that we do have political agendas is sad, because I think from an academic standpoint, we're so far behind.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
COVID killed us.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that, Chris, because I want to talk about that a little bit. It was one of the points I wanted to hit today, but since you brought it up, let's talk about it.
Let's go there.
Because listen, I'm gonna agree with you that COVID hurt the public school system. I think that's undeniable. But let's be fair to. It wasn't necessarily COVID that hurt it. It was how we handled COVID that hurt it. However, and this is something that I think is important for people to know, because I hear this a lot. In fact, I heard this today when we were at that event this morning. And we were talking about education and how far behind Michigan students are because of COVID, which COVID's the boogeyman, right?
Right.
But if you look at the numbers, the education in the state of Michigan has been in decline long before COVID.
I was going to say, we had one foot in the grave.
Yeah, and COVID maybe accelerated a little bit, but now we have this like boogeyman scapegoat that we can blame the failures on. But the fact of the matter is, we were headed here anyway.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe accelerated it, maybe it didn't. We could have handled it better, and maybe that wouldn't have happened. But that's not really what's to blame. It's a cop out for the school boards, the superintendents, and the administrators at this point. And on that note, it's important now to note, you can see what's coming now if you're paying attention. Go to any school board meeting right now, and all you're going to hear about is the budget issues.
Right.
They're losing money. The COVID money ran out. Right. So now, COVID's the boogeyman, but the money we got from COVID is running out. So now we have this budget shortfall. So we're going to have to lay off teachers, and we're going to have, so.
Since you're the school board guy, I've got a question.
All right.
So in the county of Jackson, every school district is projected to lose students, except for two. Grass Lake and I believe Michigan Center are the only two schools in the county who aren't losing students. Where are they going?
From what I'm seeing, I think the trends show a couple of things. Well, the state of Michigan is losing population. First of all.
Yeah,
that's going to affect everyone. But I also think that there are a lot of people that are going to less traditional types of schooling, charter schools, or homeschooling. Homeschooling is growing
huge
like crazy right now,
Yeah.
for good reason. To be honest with you, if I were to advise a young family, some young married couple that's just having children, and if I had it to do over again, I would never would have sent my kids to a public school.
Right.
And I say that, and I have two that are still there, but they're almost done. They can learn a lot faster in that environment if you do it right. It's just like anything else, right? If the public schools would do it right, they could get the same results there too. Yeah. But you can take control, and you can do a lot better at home than what they're going to get in a public school environment. If I had it to do over, I think that's what we would have done.
Well, I think one of the big things that you're missing here, Nate, is the family dynamic, right?
Oh yeah.
So the key is that if you were to homeschool your kids, they would get a fabulous education.
Sure.
But the problem is, the society in general is, pushing single motherhood, get the dad out of the house. And when you have that environment, the kid's got 3 strikes against them already.
Right.
The statistics don't lie.
No.
Having a mother and a father in the house, you're so much more likely to graduate than not having that, right?
Well, I mean, not only that, but I guess while we're on that note, I think it's important to bring up, yes, that you're 100% right. The family dynamic makes a huge difference. And I don't deny that, the home environment and all of those things are factors, and I get all of that, and I do understand that, but that doesn't relieve the school system of their responsibility to focus on education.
I agree.
And it also doesn't give them the right to take on the role of the parent, which is a different issue. But while we're talking about, you bring up like single parent homes, and you're way less likely to succeed and do well in school without
but
two
they
parents
don't
in
have
the
that
home.
option to homeschool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
You're a
no,
single mom that's got to work. She's going to be difficult for
Yeah.
them to homeschool.
100%. I probably almost impossible, which
Correct.
is a sad. But I just want to bring up, for anyone that's listening that hasn't heard this statistic, the number one predictor of future incarceration and criminal activity is fatherless home.
Right.
Not just single parent, but the absence of a father in the home is the number one predictor of future criminal behavior and incarceration. And I think that's a staggering statistic.
It is.
Especially when you pair it with, Dave, what you said about this movement in our society to dissolve the traditional nuclear family, as if it's some kind of oppressive power structure. It's just absolutely absurd. And honestly, that style of family, it works, right?
Right.
Well, the key is we don't want the
Well,
statistics to get in the way of a good emotional argument, right?
I know.
No.
I know we're talking about schools, but we all know where that stems from. That's that whole Democrat mentality of give them the money and tell them that they need us. They can't survive without us.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's kind of where we're at.
Well, just so you guys know, I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris,
Go ahead.
but during my time with helping one of the petitions, I did a lot of research on the schools and the funding because, one of the things is ask my tax to eliminate property tax. Michigan right now is number 2 in spending in the nation per child,
for students.
per student between K and post education, like
Absol-
through college. Number 2.
Yep.
Yet
It's
we
about
rank
to go up again.
we rank 48 in
Yeah.
success.
Yes.
So
That's
it's
crazy.
not about the money, right? I don't know about you. When I went to school, man, we had some dilapidated facilities. We had a track that was made out of asphalt, wasn't rubber, didn't have an artificial field, had textbooks that were 40 years old. But at the end of the day, what we had was teachers that were teaching. So our dropout rate was lower, but our reading proficiency was a lot higher back in 1987, 88.
So the reason why I brought up originally why I was bringing up this funding issue is because I wanted to point you to what you're about to see happen. Most likely our testing scores will continue to drop, and now that COVID's gone, the new boogeyman will be we don't have enough money.
Right.
And so I saw today that there's this ballot initiative that they're working on, maybe for the 2026 ballot. I heard it was going to be called like Billionaires Over Babies, which is just an absurd thing to put on the ballot.
Or was it babies over billionaires?
Babies Over Billionaires.
Because the other way around,
I was like,
Yeah.
those
that'll
things are
win.
two totally different
Yes,
things.
babies over billionaires, which is all about school funding. And what I saw, the numbers I'm seeing, and I think a lot of this is still very ambiguous, but they're like a $1 billion increase in taxation to fund schools. And I came across this thing, I took a snapshot of it, and it says this: the reality is Michiganders pay about double for education in 2025 than they did in 2000. 20 billion versus 10 billion.
Right.
To educate 300,000 fewer students. So
Yeah.
our student population has declined, and the funding has increased. All along, the test scores have plummeted. Now, another thing you can see in if you look at the budget and the way the money is being spent, I think there are a lot of good teachers out there, and but I agree with you. You know, like teachers taught and we learned, right?
Yeah.
And there was discipline and like
Right.
But if you look at the way the money's being spent over that same amount of time, we've seen the amount of dollars spent on administrative costs increase 90%, while the amount we spent on teachers and teaching went up like maybe 10%.
And it's crazy because you can look at these schools that are very similar in size, especially here in Jackson County. And if you look at their line by line on their budgets, they spend so many different things. Like there's one school that spends like $2,000 for community projects or community services.
Yep.
There's another school that spends $23,000. They're the same size and the same size of community, and it's like we need a Doge to come in and start going through these budgets.
Well, you mentioned the administration. You know, when one of my kids is actually going to be transitioning to public school this year. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but that's her decision. She's
Sure.
15. She knows better than everybody anyway, right? So 15 years old.
I got one of those.
My dad literally used to tell my sister when she's that age, you should write everything down while you still know it, right?
Right.
You know, that was always his thing. But when I went to school, I went to Wayne High, graduated in 1989. Do the math, I'm old. But we had a class when we started, and we were 9th, 10th, and 11th. So when we started in 9th graders, we had over 1,000 students in our class. Okay? The class above us was about 800, and the one above them was probably 750. We had one principal and 2 assistants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 administrators for close to 2,700 students.
And now you've got 2 secretaries per administrator and all kinds of unnecessary.
Oh, you have a principal for the 9th grade, a principal for the 10th grade, a principal for the 11th grade,
Right.
a vice principal for, so yeah, that administration level.
Principal, a vice principal, an assistant principal, and a dean of students.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
then you got your-
real example. By
Then
the
you
way.
got your
Yeah.
student or your superintendent.
superintendent, your curriculum director,
Exactly.
your diversity director.
Exactly.
Let's not leave out the diversity director.
Right,
Very
right.
important.
Now, I got
And
a
then
question
your
for you on
athletic
that.
director.
So they're public schools. The diversity is who shows up. Why you need a director for that?
Boy, I wish I could answer that. You know,
I mean, it's not like you're selecting who comes. It's not like you're like, I'm sorry, we have enough white people, you stay home, or we got enough
Right.
African Americans, you're no longer allowed to be admitted here. We
How
got to
much-
keep the numbers straight.
How much you get paid for that job?
Yeah, I mean,
I
I
just
could
be
do
the
that.
counter.
That's a great. Like I said, I wish I could answer the question. And to be completely honest with you, I actually asked the local school board that question. I asked them that question. What are we paying this person for? Why do we need a diversity director? And of course, they don't answer. They don't have to answer you.
No.
But I've asked the question. I don't really know. I don't know what that job is. I don't know what they do. To me, if I'm going to be completely honest, what I hear from students and other people in the school is it sounds like this person is basically a hall monitor that with a fancy title. I'm sure there are other things I don't know about.
Probably a pretty fancy paycheck too.
Yeah,
I'm guessing,
I have no idea. I
As
think we could
as a
look at-
diversity director, I'm sure
would think.
they're highly qualified as a hall monitor, and
I think
are
we
making
could look
6+
that up.
figures.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we could look that up. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's checking some DEI box that they're required to
Yeah,
check.
Right.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
But it is one of the things we have to remember is those are our dollars. that
Right.
are being
You know
spent.
what?
Hey, thanks for watching Stars, Stripes, and Straight Talk with Chris and Dave. This episode with Nate was cut short because we're trying to stay within our 30-minute format. So do me a favor and hit that like, subscribe, share, send us a comment, let us know what you think of this part. But part 2, the conclusion of our conversation with Nate, will come out this Wednesday at 5 p.m. So make sure you ring that notification bell. Make sure it's clicked on all so that as soon as that video drops, you'll be able to watch it.